Good afternoon, everyone. Clearly, I was the only one to get the memo on the fancy dress tie day, but apologies for that. Two pieces of good news. The first thing is I'm going to keep this to probably less than 30 minutes. So if there are any time, there should be time for questions at the end. And also, I'm not going to do a big piece around Maxima. If you do want to come and understand what Maxima does, then our stand's out there, and my attractive colleagues, I'm sure, will be able to provide you the information required. Collaboration is one of those topics which is, it's quite a broad topic, yeah? And putting together information to get together today, I'd like to just put a little bit of a definition around what I mean by collaboration. Clearly, it's the things that we use every day, like email, and it's the things like the collaboration tools, maybe Messenger and those types of technologies. But also about sharing data as well, so sharing information to help with those collaborative processes. And I see collaboration really as a type of loose business process. It's a very important process. And I think increasingly we're seeing that some of the things that are happening with collaboration is that it's starting to come from the home into the workplace. And I'll talk a little bit about that as part of the first point around the transformational forces, which are starting to affect the adoption of collaboration tools and services. The second thing, controversial statement maybe after some of the sessions earlier on today, but collaboration natives are under 30. I'll qualify that as we go through, and there may be some exceptions I wanted to add as well. And the other piece is around then how collaboration is starting to impact the business and start to provide, business is starting to capitalize on the collaboration technologies, and then leading into 3 examples from customers that we're working with. Can I just ask a question? The technologies down the left-hand side, LinkedIn or services, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Hands up anyone who has never used them. Brave man. Okay, so it's a technology that's very broadly used, and you've done very well to avoid it so far. They're clearly technologies that tended to be used in the sort of home and outside of the office space, but now start to be brought into the office. And I consider myself as one of these what I would term expats. Some of these people are not natural to these technologies. You could probably tell by my initial introduction where under my name was my email address rather than a Twitter account or something. Yeah, it's, emails and phone is probably my natural base and my natural language. Yeah, but I'm starting to see how these things can be useful in the business, and I'm starting to bring these things into the business and seeing colleagues doing similar sort of things. It's interesting, my 60-year-old son, when he saw me using LinkedIn, he sort of watched for a couple of minutes and said, it's like Facebook for old people. I thought it was a very good description. But, I sort of come on to then the natives, which are kind of driving some of this, which, I'll give you an example, again, family member. I'll come and talk a little bit about this, but, my daughter, if there was an Olympic event for collaboration, she'd be there on the podium, yeah? And the way that I've seen the younger people, and I consider myself in the sort of 40-plus category, the younger people coming into the workforce who are just naturally used to these technologies, and I just find it, I just don't find I have the bandwidth to be able to deal with some of these things. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, and the influence that new blood into the business is having. And then the other factor, which is really around, in the past, collaboration projects have been quite difficult to get justification for. The softer benefits, lower intangible benefits, quite difficult to be able to justify them. I'll talk a little bit about this as well. Clearly, delivering those as a cloud service makes things a lot easier to be able to say, well, look, let's give it a 6-month try. Let's make a go of this on a small scale and see if we can see some benefits before we fully deploy. And again, that makes it easier to start to use some of those technologies. I kind of feel lost if I didn't at least show some form of slide which shows some form of industry metrics. This is getting a little bit old now, but Keystone did a survey a few years back. And what they did was they looked at people who had actively used and deployed collaboration and productivity tools in their business, and then started to do some measurements in terms of earnings per employee. So some crude estimate of productivity improvement. And one thing that they came out with, which I guess was a key finding, was that compared to the ones who are not using collaboration tools very much, the lower quartile, comparing those with the upper quartile were getting, on average, 23% better earnings per employee. So you imagine, take your business and what it generates as turnover, and imagine, making that 5% more even. What difference that could make. So collaboration can make a massive difference to a business. It is measuring the result, which is, it tends to be one of the difficult things. So I thought it'd be useful just to talk through a little bit about my point around why I think natives under 30. And I'll use Emma, my daughter, as an example. Now, this isn't Emma. My daughter has shoes. But it is, I think, probably a good example. I watched my daughter for about an hour and a half organise a sixth form ball a couple of years back. And it was almost an experience for which, like watching wildebeest go across the plain. It was kind of a revelation for me. So I'd never seen this sort of thing happen. So let me just talk you through what I saw, and you may have experienced this already. So Emma was arranging this ball, and so the first thing, she gets home, very excited, gets straight on MSN at the time, and starts to connect with 6 or 7 conversations going in the first 5 minutes. One of the conversations then spins off that, can you deal with the music involved in a string quartet, go and organise that. Off goes another set of conversations with a string quartet to organise that in parallel. My daughter's then up to 20 or 30 conversations with people talking about who's going to deal with the venue, checking on websites, looking at availability and costs. People come back with information around that. Who's going to deal with fancies, the cakes, etc. for the evening? Well, my wife's a bit of a dab hand, so that was actually walking down the stairs and actually going and asking someone to say, will you deal with the cakes? And then, probably an hour or so into this was then, let's start to contact people who test the price of the tickets, speak with our close friends around this. And probably at the peak time, she had 30 or so conversations going at any one time. I just saw this as a remarkable way of working. It's 20 phone conversations going on would be my analogy. And all of this was just going on, and within 90 minutes, this was more or less organised. And that is such a different way of working than I'd ever experienced before. And that sort of thing is now coming into the workforce, and people are expecting that type of environment to be in place. And you can imagine the innovation that's going to drive as well around just the speed to get things done. I'll come on and talk a little bit about some of the challenges as well, because it will bring challenges with it. I thought it'd be worth just saying a little bit as well around, before I just go into some of the impact around this, is just to say I see really the cloud piece as being another layer on top of what is the global comms that we have in place at the moment. So it's a way of being able to add a layer of data and application, which means that people can share stuff, share data, communicate with each other in a more rich way than perhaps just on the phone. And one of the areas that, I guess the first area to touch on is bringing in some of the social collaboration tools into the workplace. I don't know if you saw the news that LinkedIn today has just done their first issue of shares. They went in for the top price of about $45 per share. That values them at about $4.2 billion on I think, a profit of $15 million. Yeah, the market's quite interested in this sort of stuff, yeah? You could say there might be a bit of a bubble there. But these things, these technologies are now, they're starting to see they're going to be they're more than just a social interaction. They're kind of being used in the workplace. I guess LinkedIn more for either finding jobs or finding people to fill jobs in the first instance. But we're using this technology within our business as part of marketing, sales, internal communications. These things are starting to get used more and more. I think that one of the in some ways we've got to embrace them and say yes, these are going to be used as part of our business. We can't really deny that. Some of the challenges that it brings, though, are that people are used to using these in a social setting. Sat on the sofa with a glass of wine, chatting with friends, which is quite different from the work environment. And that brings with it some challenges that, when someone might be more casual maybe in the working environment than perhaps they should be using these sort of tools. To give a simple example, someone might quite without any malice or intent, go onto a forum and say, we've got a problem with our firewall, here's the information, can you help me solve it? What a big security breach that would be. Yeah? Everyone has got the information about how to connect to your firewall and hack into your system. There are all these sort of things where people are starting to use these technologies, forums and communication, in a business setting. And I think the main thing that's missing is some form of education and some form of standards to say, if you're going to use these tools in a business setting, these are things, there's certain standards and certain ways of working that you need to adopt to make sure that they're used properly and in a business-like manner. I've worked from home for about 15 years, and I've managed to move the oven and the washer out a few years back. But this blur again of home and work, it's before 10 or 15 years ago when I first started, it was modem connections and quite difficult to work from home. Now it's a continuous experience. I don't know whether I'm in the office or at work. It's the same thing. I go on my laptop and there I am. I'm working. And that's been made easy by a lot of the technologies, hosted desktop, being able to provision virtually your desktop wherever you are, using your own equipment if necessary. So all these technologies now are making that boundary a lot more blurred. And again, this is another reason why those sort of standards and policies are quite important to have in place around how people should work with these sort of technologies. We're seeing also the main area of collaboration in business has been around things like projects and contracts. Some obvious place around information sharing. And what this brings on to talk about is not just sharing within our organization, but sharing with customers. A good example here is we do quite a bit of work in construction. Joint ventures between very big businesses that neither of which want the other to have access to their systems. And quite nice to be able to have this space to say, well, we'll share the information that we really need to as part of this project and nothing more. And this can last for the duration of the project. After that, we can archive it. And even better, we can pay for it as part of the project cost. We can cost it as part of the project value. So these are sort of things that we're seeing, and we use this as well as part of projects to our customers where we're sharing documents and design drawings and plans, etc., with customers on projects. The mobile piece. I said I mentioned there's an exception to these natives, people using these technologies. I bought my mum and dad, who are in their late 70s, an iPad for Christmas, and they're now avid Facebook fans, which is being a great policing force on our children for using Facebook as well. What's happening now is with the advent of the iPad, which I guess is defining the tablet market, what's happening is that that device is making things so simple to use. It's one button, effectively, and it's allowing people that maybe would never use a laptop, never be able to use a laptop or a PC, to be able to use some of these technologies. And I think that's the change that's starting to democratize the way that this information is being used. We found a few gotchas around these devices and using them for collaboration. The obvious one, screen size is a bit of an issue. We found things like devices that don't have QWERTY keyboards. It can be sometimes difficult to put your password in because you can't find the right keys on the number keypad to do it properly. There's a number of issues around using this, but I guess the main advantage being if it gets lost, you don't lose any data. The data is held centrally. Last piece I just want to cover on the impacts is, I mentioned at the outset around this difficulty of getting collaboration projects up and running and the risks associated with those things. What typically happens, if you've ever been through a collaboration project, what tends to happen is you spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to get the technology in place and to kind of go through and transform the way that people work, which is an expensive business, only to find after the first few months of productivity dips and people get disillusioned before you then start to get a return probably 6 or 9 months later. So in the words of a friend of mine, you've got to kind of grab your knickers on that and just sort of ride it for 6 months and say, this is going to be all right. But a bit of a high-risk strategy. Whereas with cloud, you can then start to put these technologies and these services in place at a relatively low cost. And take a small-scale view around, let's see if this is going to work in our setting before you then make a